Уважаемые коллеги, добрый день. Наш открытый лекторий продолжает свою работу, и сегодня у нас особенный день. Я имею честь представить нашего друга из Норвегии. Это эксперт с международным именем. Он является финансовым аналитиком, а также представляет Олимпийский комитет Международной Федерации хоккея с мячом. И вот эта встреча стала возможна благодаря руководству Международной Федерации хоккея с мячом и лично благодаря Борису Скрыннику, который организовал нам доступ к такой уникальной информации, которая прозвучит сегодня и завтра. Уверена, что многое из того, что сегодня Кнут Серенсен посчитает возможным рассказать вам и поделиться с вами, будет абсолютно оригинальным. Мы только сейчас, скажем, в формате ланча имели возможность обсуждать, и меня, собственно, поразило, насколько свежая, насколько уникальная информация сегодня будет предложена аудитории. Абсолютно свободно чувствуйте себя. Я думаю, что когда наш гость закончит свою презентацию, он будет... И когда наш гость закончит презентацию, я уверена, он с удовольствием ответит на все ваши вопросы. Всем удачи. Do you like to have it? Yes. Okay.
Well, I'm deeply honored to be here today in the high-ranking sports university. Do you hear me now? Yes. For this high-ranking sport university. And thank you for the introduction. I sadly don't understand Russian, so I guess I'll present myself to be secure that you know who I am. Thanks a lot for the hospitality inviting me here. Okay, my name is Knud Serенsen, and I'm trained. I have a Master of Science in Finance and also in Innovation. And my profession was to analyze public listed stocks, right? You said on the stock exchange, and to compose portfolios to create most optimized portfolios for economic performance, okay? And then we do analysis where we compare stocks based on their fundamentals, their earnings, the sales, balance sheet, and equity in this kind, this kind of. But then I discovered in sports that maybe they don't do the same fundamental analysis of the underlying fundamentals. That was how this started. I wanted to consider all winter sports as public listed stocks and compare them. And that's what we do in every sector of the economy, particularly in finance. Okay, I'm 55 years old. I have two children. And one, she's a student at University of Oslo in law. And former rower, she was rowing. And my son, I put him into diving and also cross-country skiing. Cross-country skiing is very important in Norway. It's part of our culture. But at the time, it was not so good snow in Oslo, so he decided to play bandy, which happened to be my sport. And then I became a trainer. And we took 5 gold medals in Norway. We even played... we beat Dynamo Moscow once, my youth team, born 98. Very proud. It's very rare that a Norwegian club beats a Russian club in bandy. But then I became manager of the national team in bandy. Not head coach, but the manager. So I've been to Russia several times. And today I rediscovered the hospitality in Russia. It's excellent World Championships you organize here. After I did this analysis, I really did it for myself. But I thought the findings were So interesting that I presented it for the Norwegian Bandy Federation. And then we presented for the International Bandy Federation. And then the president, Boris Grünig, asked me if I could join their committee to market bandy into the Olympics. But I will not talk so much about bandy. Bandy is just a case study from my point, okay? It's the outcome of the analysis. This is universal kind of approach. You can do the same in summer sports. It's more difficult because it's not so transparent. It's much larger, summer sports, than winter sports. Winter sports is easier. It's transparent. So that's the introduction, okay? I must not run out of my time. So then we put up some fancy logos. And then you understand the title. And the Cutterbolt is just a constructed name I used in the start, like a project, right? Cutterbolt. It is bolt cutter. And then the federation liked the name, so we kept the name. It's non-logical, it's kind of a working name. But we tried, and bandy wants, of course, to be part of the Winter Olympics. And the reason is, why is this important? The European Commission, competition authorities, they list that sports in the European economy is 3.7% of the GDP, of the national production, okay? National income. 3.7% is huge. Very few sectors have that kind of numbers in value creation. Now, of these 3.7%, I'm sure that 3.6% is soccer. So the main value creation as a business is probably in soccer. I don't know that, but I just assume that. So sports is important also, of course, for healthy lifestyles, but it is a business. Now, what governs international sport is the Olympic Charter. The Olympic Charter is partly, at least in the start, a constitution for the Olympic movement. It says it's a constitutional nature. Now, in Chapter 4, they govern. The IOC is the supreme leader, and they govern the Olympic movement. And the Olympic movement, as you know, is the IOC as the supreme leader, and then it's the 206 national member federations, the National Olympic Committees then. And then you have the international federations and their members. And then it's the organizing committees for each game, each edition of the games. That's the Olympic movement in its core. But the Chapter 4, it gives voting majority to program sports. So in all 206 nations, program sports have voting majority in their nation. And governments follow their advice in infrastructure investments and their budgets. So they have, in a way, the IOC and the Olympic movement then has both legislating power and executing power. So it's a huge power in the hands of IOC, and it's probably needed to have clear leadership in international sports. Governments and taxpayers pay to support national sports and international sports. Rich countries essentially takes this apply to organize the games, like Russia and US and Canada and Norway. They can afford it, and they support international sports through the Olympic movement. Now, this has been going on for 100 years, and of course, Olympic program sports are supposed to be the largest then. After 100 years, it's supposed to have an effect, this policy. So it's interesting to see, are they the largest? And yeah, that's also the introduction. And now I've been talking a lot, you must see some... Is this right? Okay. How do the IOC choose? Officially and truly also. It's not. It's called a review. The Olympic Program Commission produces the review. At least they did. I'm not sure whether they do anymore. This is so. I made a review of the review. Okay, I tested the review, And the review has 9 chapters that you probably recognize. If this is too elementary for you, you just say, and I can go more speedy ahead. But it's so called History and Tradition is chapter 1. Universality is the core, right? It's how we universalize sports. Are they played on 5 continents, etc. Popularity and attendance is number 3. And of course, you can read the rest. And cost is number 9, so I will go over to cost later. But now I talk about universality. What I did is really testing. Universality is really, they test 10 criteria. And the unit of observation is number of member nations in the International Federation. Okay? So, and this is based on a questionnaire. Questionnaire method is to the federations, the international federations, is good. It's not costly, but you can lose nuances in survey as a method, okay? But at least that's their method. I just keep the same model as they have, the same unit of observation, but I fill the unit of observation with content, and that's the number of athletes. So you can just say the unit of analysis become number of registered athletes. Okay? There you have an idea. I think when I ended the thesis, I thought maybe I test at least half of the 39 criteria, at least, if not more. But directly testing these 10, but of course also history and popularity, it's about 22 of the 39 criteria. And I have a fun story. I did it and I didn't understand anything. And then I asked the Secretary General, Fib, but what was the outcome of our response? I asked him. I said, we have never delivered. They've been asked to deliver. So why do they do it? So, okay, we have to carry on. So the key findings then. There are only, in the Olympic Charter in 1973 said you need at least 25 nations with real ongoing activity, nationally and internationally. Okay, or widespread activity is another word. So in 1973, in the Olympic Charter, that was written for winter sports, 25 nations, 3 continents. All new sports had to reach that at once. But the current sports, they got 8 years to reach it. And that was postponed because they couldn't reach it. And 45 years later, or 46 years later, many of them has not reached it yet. You have essentially 2 sports that has reached at those 3 continents. And these are ice hockey and alpine skiing. They have real ongoing activity. And I guess most of the others, about half, 5, 6, have 2 continents, if we shall talk about continents. And 5 are only on 1 continent. So then you have 15. I think most ice hockey players will be surprised to say that they are in fact in 5 continents. They are even in Africa, because the hurdle is so low to try to find some activity in number of athletes. And then we benchmark the 15 disciplines, right? There are 7 federations, 15 disciplines, 102 events in Pyeongchang. It was 98 in Sochi, I think. It will be 109 in Beijing, 2022. In fact, if you look at Agenda 2020, the reform program, an event is now supposed to be a sport. Each event shall defend its position. That's, I compare the 15 disciplines, but you should compare the 102 events. Okay? And then I think outcome is clear. And then I also checked the ticket sales on each international federation's world championships to compare these sports outside the clout of the IOC, outside the aegis of the IOC. because a non-Olympic sport cannot perform in the Olympics because they're not in the Olympics. So every researcher would have done something like that, trying to adjust for the context of difference between an Olympic and a non-Olympic sport. So data has become better now, of course, and some of these federations are very good in disclosing their information, statistics. I needed to work a lot, but I think particularly FIS has good database. Also the sliding federations good, not so good in the International Skating Union, but it took a lot of work there, but finally I got it. So the surprising result then is that bandy in number of athletes was number 2. So then, on behalf of Bandy Federation, I say there's been a lot of myth about bandy. It's for 40 years ago, we were only 4 nations. But if you look at the aggregates of the Winter Olympics, 80% of athletes are in 6 nations. It's North America, Canada and USA, and you have Russia and the 3 Nordics, 80% of athletes. Plus ice hockey and alpine outside that area. If you add the alpine area, which is not very large, it's probably smaller than this cry, 10 million people in that territory, 600,000 in the municipalities with skiing venues, not very large. It's like Sochi city, 600,000. That's the recruitment base in the 5 alpine nations. But it looks good because 5 flags. And then you have Holland that dominates speed skating with their 20 venues. So then you have almost 90% of real ongoing activity in those 12 nations. And if you add another 10 nations, you are almost at 100%. Also in medals. High correlation between medals and number of athletes, not surprising. High correlation between popularity and number of athletes. In winter sports, 0.97, almost completely explained by number of athletes. That's by far the best aggregate to make an analysis or review of which sport should belong to the on the sports program. Okay, so this was the exact figures. It's interesting to see. Soccer is the world's largest sport, right? Probably the largest. So, in World Championships in football, from 1930 to 2014, 11 nations have taken 83% of the medals, systematic winners, right? So then you have a benchmark for winter sports. What's the case in winter sports? It's about 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5 nations, and the average is 5 nations have won 82% of the medals. Systematic winners. Of course, the Olympic Charter emphasized that this is not a competition between nations, it's a competition between individual athletes and teams. Because it's belonged to the international movement. It's not supposed to, this was established as a counterweight to nationalism. Pierre de Coubertin. But we tend to forget that, particularly we in Norway. We love to see these medals in small sports. But so that was the outcome. Okay. So 5 nations. So in fact, if you go then 50 years back in time, there were no argument against bandy. We had as many nations, as relevant nations as the other one. If you look at underlying infrastructure, I haven't made an analysis of that. We have also much more infrastructure because we share venues with soccer and other sports. So this is, for those of you, you will write a thesis, I understand. And you need to define your unit of analysis. So this is the only I have found where you can compare all sports, because an active athlete is defined differently from nation to nation. So it's impossible to compare the lower aggregates here. recreational outside organized sport is very important for healthy lifestyle. We cannot measure it. Alpine skiing could measure it, probably, because lift passes, right? But the other ones we can't measure. Probably alpine skiing is the largest winter sport, if you include that. But I don't know, but I assume that. Now, children's sports below 13 years old, different definitions, no aggregates, I found at least. So we ended up with active athletes in international federations, registered there. And then you, yeah, so that's, and then you can ask yourself, if we had an aggregate, would concentration increase or decrease? If we had the other day, I think it would increase. I think Norway, this is an example you see on the extreme right here. This is the exceptions of very large national federation sections. For example, Norwegian ski federations, cross-country skiing discipline, you know that? Norway has 27% of all IF athletes. I would assume it will increase if you had a broader aggregate. It could be the same. So 2 out of 3 options confirms that this is generalizable for the universe. But of course, I could be wrong, that it actually decreases. In that case, one arguably can say real ongoing activity is a bit broader than these 12 nations then, okay? So then I've been a bit scientific then. So this is about the situation. Of course, if you look at the lower, I didn't find on speed skating and curling. This is just a, how do you say that, calculation. It's not data. It's just calculated. I told the International Band Federation, this is a huge job. Why can't we just assume that is a correlation 1 between medals and athletes? Then we have it, because then we have in a simple grade equation, we have 2 knowns, but 1 unknown. And they dismissed it. But that was this. But the thing then, everything was here. But when I got the figures, I had to reduce, but they stand as they were calculated. I'm not sure whether they have so many, or if they have more. Okay. There are very small numbers here. So it's not so interesting. You have the 3, you have ice hockey is by far the largest, of course. But also in America, you see the other sports, not so many athletes. So America is huge in winter sports, but it's 99% ice hockey. And alpine skiing is okay. But it's not so many athletes in them, but that's irrelevant. America is important because it's America who pays the television rights. NBC pays still 50% of the television rights. If you should consider television, it should work in the USA and Canada, because they pay. And they pay a lot. The television income is increasing in Asia and the Middle East. But Europe doesn't pay a lot. So why have so many heritage sports from Western Europe if they don't pay? Okay, Asia includes, of course, Asian part of Russia and Asian part of former Soviet Union. So, and then Europe. It is, of course, still the second largest, but of course, this has mainly been heritage sports from Europe, so it's no surprise. Africa and Oceania, I guess, maybe New Zealand can do it in winter sports, but no one expects them to perform here. This is the 7 federations. I find it strange. At least you have to think, the International Ski Federation has half of the events. Here you say 49 events in Sochi, of the 98 events. It's huge concentration to 1 federation. And 80% of this is alpine skiing and cross-country skiing. So Yeah. And of course you have the smaller federations. These are all fantastic sport, excellent sports, nothing wrong with the sports. But we give our children needs to perform at school. They get in Norway grades from they are 12 years old. The society is based on competition. If I want to supply something to this university, I need to compete with competitors to win the contract, right? And particularly in sports, it's supposed to be competitive. But this program was set in 1924. It hasn't changed. The exceptions confirm the pattern that you needed to be there in 1924 to be on the program. So the same federations increases with the same, with multiple disciplines and events. Okay, this is US. Now, yeah, it's you have, if on average these sports claim to have, on average I think it was 82 nations, member nations. Wow, that was impressive. It were 88 flags flying in Sochi, 92 in Pyeongchang. But in terms of national member federations in these international federations, okay, it's a bit technical. Who organizes this discipline at national level, okay? There are 1,350. But 97% of the athletes are associated with 63 national federations. So 5% of the federations have 97% of the athletes. So you need to have real ongoing activity, at least some more than 400 athletes, I think, to kind of defend this project. And bandy has that, I told the federation. Strange that you're not in the Olympics. It is popular. I think if bandy had been here in the Olympics, you know Sochi better than I do, but my experience from Russia, I've been here 11 times now. We fill the stadiums. I mean, we have much more spectators than other sports. This is from Sweden. It's just national. It's the national end game, okay? It's not invested billions of dollars, but it is probably costly, but it's not really. And this is a football stadium because we share venue. And suppliers of ice technology now delivers fixed installations for maybe 2 million euros. Mobile ice you can use, mobile ice you can deploy for $1 million maximum. If you have a football stadium, you have everything in bandy because bandy is really the soccer on ice. Okay, I looked a bit on tickets sold. I guess you tend to use tickets per competition day is the unit I see. I don't know, you probably have other units. But I took that. So bandy, I just had to put in World Championships in bandy and compare it with the Olympics, 3 Olympics. I believe it was the 3, Torino, Vancouver. Sochi, I believe. I must check it. No, it was in 2 Olympics, Torino and Vancouver. And then put in 2 World Championships in Russia. You see we are a bit down there, but you also see we have fewer competition days. 7 competition days. So if you take per competition day, actually, surprisingly, bandy moves up in popularity in tickets sold. So there's been a myth that we don't have spectators, or bandy doesn't have that. But again, I mentioned briefly, this is, in the summary document, this is more nicely portrayed, but you probably see what I mean here. You have the big 12 nations, and you have very few sports that have become universal. And 3 continents, 25 nations. What you can do to capture the Olympic principles. The Olympic principles, you know, it's page 11 and 12, Olympic Charter. You have 7 Olympic principles. Agenda 2020 said that the Olympic movement should be held accountable to the Olympic principles. That's their mandate. And the Olympic principles says, the principle number 3 says, 5 continents, but it's 3 continents in winter sports. They don't say it, but that's the interpretation. Okay, what you could have done is to choose heritage sports from outside the core area, so that you included at least Asia in a better way. So what is winter sports in Asia historically is essentially former Soviet Union and Russia. So you have heritage sports here from every of these big 12, particularly in Norway. Have many heritage sports from Norway. So I tell the Norwegians sometimes, we win a lot of medals because we had great sports administrators in 1924 that filled up with Norwegian sports, and they called it Nordic sports, but essentially they are Norwegian sports. It explains why we win many events for Norway. It's a bit unfair. Many events for Germany. And US got some, after some years. Wow, everyone, you can rather look on the contrary. Which of the Big 12 does not have their heritage sport in the Olympics? Heritage sports is a definition by the IOC in their narrative of the different sports. Well, it's not Russia. The reason why we have Asia in a relevant format in the Olympic Winter Games is because of Russia. Adapted Western sports. If they hadn't done that, it would be 2 continents. But also, you could arguably say that Finland and Sweden have some heritage sports. But maybe cross-country you can say, yeah. It is part of their culture, history, and it's sustained, but not anymore ski jumping or Nordic combine. 80% of Swedish athletes are in ice hockey, cross-country skiing, and bandy. It's the same in Finland. Finland is more kind of ice sport nation. And the common denominator of these nations are bandy. That's the history. If you go back prior to the Olympic Winter Games, history, you know, one chapter is about history. It's ice hockey in Europe was what we today call bandy. And Russia kept hockey in their official name, right? So, but they were angry with the Swedes at the time, so they excluded biathlon and bandy. So that's why we didn't become part of the Olympics. But statistics now 100 years afterwards is quite clear. That bandy is qualified. And it outperforms current Olympic sports. This is just a case. It would be interesting to do the same in the Summer Games. It's a huge data job. I will not do it. But I think that would be interesting. Possibly baseball, softball, cricket. Probably is qualified as well. Well, we were part of the Olympic Winter Games 1952 as a demonstration sport in Oslo. Unfortunately, Soviet Union didn't come, but then we merged in 1955 and we became one federation. But it's important to know that the forerunner to the Olympic Winter Games was the Nordic Games, and also to a certain degree the Spartakiades. And bandy was part of that program. So it was a strange outcome of the... So I think then we can take this first... I see that you, must be boring, you're a bit tired here. My apologies. I think that's the universality, universality chapter. Now, Irina asked me to talk about cost, Olympic cost. I say I spend a lot of time here now. Maybe we should pick up this 2.1, quote on no hindrance, if they can hear me, the technicians. Yes, good, that's good, excellent. Do you have any questions to the first analysis? It's 3 years old, it's not updated, it's not necessary. There's no huge change, I think, in activity in the different sports. But any questions with regards to the method or unit of analysis or unit of observation? No? Then I can go on to cost. Yeah. Well, I understand the IOC. Let me defend the IOC a bit. The IOC is in a reform program. The IOC has been much more criticized historically. After all, now the criticism now with IOC is, I think, is almost unfair sometimes, because they are trying to reform with the Agenda 2020 and with this new norms policy that's want to save money, right? No compact games anymore, to reduce cost and be more efficient. And I think the IOC is doing the right things, but they haven't fully implemented the Agenda 20 reform and new norms policy on the sports program. That's what they should do. And when they want to reduce cost, it's not about quota, it's about cost. Quota is the 2,900 athletes that can join. It has 10 doubled since 1924. It has increased with 120 athletes for each edition of the games, one bandy event. Almost always to the same federation currently on the program. In some, it has increased with 2,650 since 1924. It's quota doesn't correlate with operating expenses. It's just a proxy. When the IOC communicate, they oversimplify. It's not about, this is about cost, not quota. You can increase quota with 100, 200, as long as the budget doesn't increase. But they need to communicate in a simplified way, because that's what journalists is capable of, to understand. I think it's the same. The West didn't understand such. They didn't understand that this was a refurbishment of an entire an entire territory. That $40 billion was about the region, not about sports. Sports-related cost was not much more than Korea, I think. But the West didn't understand, because people cannot read easy things. They don't distinguish between different budget items. And so therefore, as I would want to say that quota should be fixed at 2,900. In fact, it's, you see, this was to jump a bit. 2 areas. Subarctic climate zone is where you can do winter sports. Outside that area, you need ice. Snow cannot work outside that area, not in a large scale. So they need more ice. That was the point there. Here we can just jump. It just says that if the IOC and the Olympic movement shall be held account to the fundamental principles, it needs to be affected on the sports program. So they need, in fact, bandy. If you look at the budgets, this is numbers taken from Oxford University. Oxford University have a program just looking at mega projects, okay? And they look at railway investments, roads and tunnels and huge ports and IT. And then they included Olympics as a mega project to see whether they kept the budget. I'm not going to talk so much about budget or budget deficits, more about benchmarking again. But what they said is that in the Summer Games, the average sports-related cost between 1960 and today has been $5.3 billion. Okay? But the Winter Games has average sports-related costs of 3.1. No, but the quota in the Summer Olympics is 10,500. So in fact, the Olympic Winter Games, to be as efficient as the Summer Games, cost per capita, should be 6,142. In other words, the current sports, each athlete is twice as costly as a summer sports athlete. It's very costly sports in the Olympics. The Winter Olympics need more events. They need more athletes for less cost, right? Every business leader will conclude that. That was the first Gerhard Heiberg told me. Gerhard Heiberg is the Norwegian former IOC member. He is also a business economist. He says, we need more sports, not less sports. So there is an efficiency gap here. Quota is only 2,900, should be 6,000. Wow, it's very costly, as you can see in easy benchmarking. Yeah, quota starts in 1924 with 258 athletes, and it ends up to 2,900. So it increases each edition from to the same federations. If you include bandy, it's I think I used 12 teams here. 6 male teams, 6 female teams. And you see most beds are the organizing staff. Athletes is 2,900, and you have some bed nights also with the, of course, supporting personnel. But for example, bandy then, if it comes in with 256, it's less than 1 percentage point of the bed nights. I don't think you would see a huge difference in budgets with or without bandy. So my point here is just quota is no hindrance. It's important for you as future leaders to do the financial digging, right? So we don't use wrong numbers. You can see here, you will increase quota, but you will lose average costs if you include an affordable sport that uses existing infrastructure as Bandit does. So, different federations. So you will probably be distributed so that you can read it. I don't need to take all the details today. I come from the financial industry, right? So I created portfolios. So the law said I cannot have more than 10% in one stock because of the diversification, okay? Not all eggs in one basket. It's a principle. It's proved mathematically that that's the best portfolio management system. The other ones, maximum 5%. So mathematically, never fewer than 16 stocks in the stock fund for diversification. The situation here is hugely concentrated to some very few stocks. FIS has half, and then ISU has 26%. 2 federations have 75%. 3 federations has 86%. But the most popular one is the ice hockey, which is only 2%. Yeah, figure skating is very popular, of course, in ISU. Alpine skiing is very popular in FIS. And curling came late in. They were at the program in 1924, but didn't came in permanently on the program as late as 1989. 98, sorry. Those 3 sports have 60% of the spectators on stadium. So, and they have combined 22 events, 102 events. So the remaining 80 events, I don't think in a competitive environment or everyone could survive in the competition against new challengers. But my point is, this is not a diversified portfolio. This is a hedge fund. This is a high-risk portfolio. In the language of the investor. Yeah, this is not. So, after the criticism of IOC, who are you responsible for? You're a non-democratic organization. You don't have any watchdogs. Who are you accountable to? Then they take the Olympic principles. I shall not talk about that today, but just give you a glance. It's just 7 principles. The Bible has the 10 commandments, and the Olympic Charter has 7 principles. Composed This organization should just follow their own principles and construct a portfolio based on that. Okay. Then we can, do you need, shall I just carry on, or questions with cost? Okay, next, then we can take the next presentation. I can do this a bit more speedy. You just raise your hand if you have a question, okay? I think it will come. It's called Bandy Aligned with New Norms. Can I please get that? Yes, good. Thank you. I think I've said a lot about this now. So now, for the Olympic Winter Games to survive, they probably have less than 1% of all athletes in the world. They need to move into urban areas where people live. Science conclude that sport is done in 30 minutes proximity, walking distance from the venue. And in winter sports, most likely that will be ice. That's why ice hockey is the largest. It's even largest in the alpine area, because ice is more affordable. And you need an affordable sport. These sports are not only costly for the games, but it's also costly for the parents. You can say a lot about football, but football doesn't exclude anyone. In Russia now we saw poor underprivileged boy, or his origin, decided the final endgame in the world's largest sport in Russia, from humble background. That's what sport's supposed to be. That's the Olympic principle number 1. So you cannot design a program only for the upper middle class. Sports should include all. So you need an affordable sport. They have some. I think curling is not expensive. Speed skating probably not. But bandy are among probably the more affordable. This is from Lillehammer Youth Olympic Games, the venue. Just a soccer field. It's natural ice, not even artificial ice. Use the same venues. Probably the most common venue in the world is the soccer stadium. It's used by many ball sports, about 60 times 100 meters. It's lacrosse and field hockey and rugby, and it's most common. Just add ice and you have a bandy venue. And we share with 5 skating sports. You can see here pictures of, here's the technique then, if you want to fix the installation. You see the soccer field here, and you see the ice field, just 2 seasons. They're in even environmental plans. Environment is one part of the criteria list in the Olympic Program Commissions. It's, so here, they produce energy, in fact. So we have bandy outdoors, that produce power plants, that produce energy for nearby dwellings. I had that in Oslo. Okay. How can any ice hockey nation compete with North America, Canada, and USA when Canada and USA have 71% combined of all enclosed indoors? It's impossible, isn't it? Well, what did Finland, Russia, and Sweden do? What do they have in common? They have affordable, large-size outdoors. Because then sports is available for everyone. Many ice hockey players have background from bandy or combined, because it's less costly. So if you calculate, for example, take Sweden then. They have only 320 ice hockey rinks, okay? It's huge by Norwegian standard. We have only 50, but if you calculate the equivalent of their bandy outdoors, they have almost 700 or 400 equivalents, okay? So per capita, Sweden is not so much behind Canada, or at least not USA then. So this is what Europe should do. They should learn from Russia, Sweden, and Finland. create more affordable outdoors ice where people live. And this is some prices, not so, as you can see, very doable. This is euros. So, for example, if you take 128, the ISU has a standard. We know 400 meters speed skating, right? That's in the Olympics. But they also have a standard called 128. It's a bit more smaller for youth, for children, elderly. Now, if you make a venue like that, you have the soccer. It costs 1 million euros in Scandinavia. Don't mind the numbers. If you add ice, it's 3 million. A bit more expensive, so we come to 4 million. But then 4 skating sports can share with football. So even in the US, in Minneapolis, Twin Cities, ice hockey use the bandy pitch because it doesn't cost so much money. Yeah, I would guess I stressed my point here. So you have indoors now in Russia and Sweden, but also share with soccer stadium. But I'm a conservative guy. I like outdoors. Here you see outdoors. This is like taken from New Norms policy. They say use demountable seating. This is from the World Championships in Gothenburg, 2012, I think. Here are demountable seatings. This is a park, fixed ice though, but ice for the public and for the skating sports. And this is almost at the main Paradegatan, Parade Boulevard in Göteborg. So you can put it everywhere. So this is an example of the New Norms policy that we essentially have done for for 100 years. USA, they decided to go for, they also played hockey with ball, historically, but joined Canadian rules with the puck late 1800. Here you can see an old Christmas card, American child, in fact, played ball hockey. And you can see here in very old pictures, we were very good on women's sports. Now gender equality became fashionable 10 years ago, but also Soviet Union had a very good program for women sports and women bandy. So it has history. Okay. Questions? I think this last one will be kind of I think if we can jump to 2.4, cost per winter discipline, that will be fun. Yeah. Okay, he took the. Okay, I can take this very rapidly. Okay. Are you sleeping? Please stop me if you have any questions. I don't have any. In Norway, I know ball sports is 50% of all, and Norway is very engaged in winter sports, put a lot of money in winter sports, individual sports, but in Norway. 14% are in winter sports in Norway, membership base. Less than 10% real ongoing activity is in winter sports, and we are a big winter sports nation. So then I guess it's much lower in all other countries. So my guesstimate is 1%. By far the largest category of sport is ball sport. There are also other categories that are huge. For example, dance. Dance is very large, not in the Summer Olympics. Very popular. So the ball is a prototype of our planet. So the Chinese invented the inflatable ball using an animal, how do you say that? A bladder. And then you took 8 pieces of leather and sinew and then made the first inflatable ball. The legend says, the Chinese says. Then they invented the football. So the football is probably the greatest, the ball, inflatable ball, is probably the greatest sport innovation in history. There is unsustainable cost per athlete in several Olympic disciplines. We have a low cost per athlete. And we will lower average cost per capita significantly if included. And we belong to the most popular sports category. Here are the numbers from the Olympic, the source. So this is fun, of course, when you have the numbers from Oxford University and combine them with number of athletes that I have found, you get some quite high numbers that proves that it's not sustainable. 19 million per registered field athlete is not sustainable. I don't know what word I shall use as an economist. If you take the Summer Olympics, we don't know. I don't know how many millions conduct all sports in the world, but likely $5.3 billion divided by 100 million people, I don't know, athletes. It's probably $50 per capita, maybe it's $100 per capita. So if Russia organizes Summer Olympics, it makes sense because it's not so high cost for every athlete in the world. In winter sports, we have a problem. We don't have so many athletes, and costs shouldn't be as high. So when you take these per capita numbers, my point is here not to criticize, my point is just to show Bandy is lower, and we will reduce, even if you distribute the costs per of the entire universe, not only the athletes' quota in the games. So here, I apologize for a bit. It should be total cost. This is 1993 to 2016 numbers. Yes, I did this to make a pro forma profit and loss, just for fun, profit and loss statement. So we spent $148 billion, and IOC revenues is $32 billion in the same period. So taxpayers pay $116 billion. Clearly, the biggest sponsor of sports, at least winter sports, is the taxpayer. How I distribute between summer games and winter games is surprisingly high numbers than 4. And take the total number, divide with 7 sports. I could have divided with 50% to FIS. In that case, FIS, we have invested $36 billion in FIS. I don't think that's very competitive when there are no athletes outside alpine skiing and cross country. And this is Phil. Great sport, great athletes, but 541 athletes registered in 2015. In the 5 nations that taken all the medals, I think it was 290 athletes. Okay, high cost. Yeah, these are just running through. It's simple arithmetic, it's nothing. But we see the point. Whether you divide per athlete quota or the underlying universe, we need a greater underlying universe. We need a ball sport because in Winter Olympics we have downs, which is a huge category sport. So you could increase with figure skating synchronized, I think, because this is very popular among girls. And then you will have a huge follow, or you need a ball sport. And when you are Russian or Norwegian, you know winter sports, the point with snow and ice is that you use some kind of gear, skate or a ski, to create speed or agility. So it's not probably soccer on snow. It's not volleyball on snow that they showcase these days. I would assume it needs to be a skate or a ski or sled or something. So it's huge cost. And it's, yeah, these are just running through the numbers, right? You have one data set, the other one, make a simple division and you get the numbers. If you add bandy, you will immediately reduce then this average. So you will lower average cost. If you bandy replaces another sport, expensive sport, using very expensive venue, few athletes, you will reduce cost. I don't think you should or other sports should replace the 7. I think they should be there. I think we need more activity in the Olympic Winter Games. So I'm not suggesting that. Okay, Bandy. Yeah. So that's running through those numbers. Now you must have some questions. This is your speciality. So I have one more presentation, I think. But you see, the point is that to compare, let's say then, if you talk about ski orienteering, or ice climbing, or dog sled, if I were from them federation, I would say, okay, we have almost as many athletes as the smallest Olympic sports, but we have not had the benefit of these huge billions of dollars. Any researcher, any scientist, analyst would adjust for context. So they can in a way claim, adjusted for context, they are bigger than the smaller Olympic sports. The strange thing with bandy is that you don't have to adjust. It's bigger anyway. And it better reach the Olympic principles. Okay. Yeah, I guess the Olympic financial model was the next, yeah. So we understand. No. Okay. Okay, do you recognize these numbers, 150 billion? But that's all, not sports related. It includes infrastructure. Yeah, you divide it 4 billion, 35 federations, 28 summer, 7 winter. That's 35 IFs, 4 billion on each. But only 3% of those go back to the federation. They receive IOC monies to be on the Olympic program. So when Sochi is organizing Olympic Winter Games, parts of the money will go to the sports, just on those on the program. So you see the average sports-related cost of the Winter Games 1960 to 2012, 3 billion. If we do not include ice hockey and bandy, there are only 52,000 athletes older than 3 years competing in international tournaments. And it's $60,000 per capita. Now, the same, here I compare the summer games. No, I do not. I include ice hockey and bandy. And ice hockey is by far the largest contributor. If you see on the left, it's the same. 52,000 athletes divided. The 3 billion divided by 52,000 athletes is 60,000 per capita. But if you include the 1 million, 1.5 million ice hockey players and 35,000 bandy players, you would reduce it to $2,000 per capita, underlying universe. But it's still expensive. So here we need, as economists, to look what are the different items. You have the total cost. So here I just take in the red ones. I exclude capital cost in non-sports related. Okay? Only include operational cost and sports related capex. So we get the right numbers. And you recognize these numbers. 5.2 for the Summer Games, 3.1 for the Winter Games. And if you look at cost overruns, it's not, this has been, the worst was Lake Placid 1980. And then Lillehammer, almost the same as Sochi. It's not only Sochi that went over budget. So, but the problem is that the average is 156% over budget. That's not good. But that has improved according to Oxford University. It has in fact come down to 50% now. So if they recruit more skilled people like you, that will be Master of Sports Administration, it probably will reach budget one day. So what they argue is that it's unethical to have artificially low budgets. Now, ethics is Olympic principle number 1. So we shall not manipulate. For example, is it realistic now that Stockholm can organize Winter Games for $1.5 billion, half of the average? Okay, they have all the venues, but it's great if they can. But it would be very unethical if they manipulate and say artificially low budgets, right? You see the point? And that's the message also from these researchers. And even endorsed by the American Planning Association and Daniel Kahneman. Have you heard about Daniel Kahneman? Of course, he's a celebrity psychologist, behavioral psychologist. He and Amos Tversky from Israel developed this, proved how poorly our gut feelings are. We have so strong belief in our own gut feeling that we forget to look at the statistics. So he asked his students, did several tests on his students and said, who is Linda? Linda is a feminist. She has a very orderly office, and she has progressive ideas in political view. Is she a librarian, or does she work in a bank? What do you guess? Based on this description of Linda. Orderly, feminist, politically active. Well, I did the mistake. I thought she was a librarian because I believed so much in these pictures. Okay? But there are 100 times more women working in banks than there are librarians, they explain. So the likelihood is that she works in a bank. And what's the point is just to demonstrate that we people do that mistake all the time. We forget to look at the statistics. Okay? And that's what happened with bandy. Because all the pictures that's coming in are in the other sports. So everyone believes luge is larger than bandy. Even one club in Russia is larger than luge. One bandy club is larger. So don't distrust your own gut feeling. Use scientific method, analytical method. That was Daniel Kahneman. Who is Linda? Remember that. Okay. Here's the cash flow system. You see on the extreme right, the benefactor is you, the taxpayer. They get a guarantee from government, parliament. Okay, maybe I should go like this. You pay. Government guarantees. Host city also pays a little, but they are the franchisee of the Olympic Games. Okay? Let's say that's $3 billion. Simplified, International Olympic Committee keep most of the money. The organizing committee also keeps something, okay? But simplified is the IOC. It keeps money from television and from sponsors. And then they redistribute the major part back, 90% back to sports. They take 10% for running IOC. And who are the beneficiaries? It's the next Olympic Winter Games. Now it's $925 million in the next games. And it's the National Olympic Committees. It's a good system that we can support poor countries also can have sports activity. So it's called a solidarity program. It's very good, I think. But then also to the sports federation, we call that IOC monies. But only sports on the program. So that's how you support international sport. So then it's crucial to be on the program. You understand that both legally, in legislation or Olympic Charter, and also execution power. So this is the same in words. Okay? So it's a transfer system. So the taxpayers want to do something at Lillehammer, for example, and they think, what can we do? Yeah, maybe we can organize a sports events. Okay, then we can hire. It's not McDonald's, it's IOC. And IOC, take a fee, I don't know, 10%, and they go out and someone shall deliver the sports content, and they go to the same 7 federations. Okay, so I find it very strange that I have to say this. The system is only legitimate if, or accountable, if it's fair qualification system. If not, the IOC is a federation, a super federation, or a special interest organization. Okay, they need, so, yeah, this is the name I tried to find, Irina. The Olympic Games Knowledge Management Program is there. That system is kind of, IOC is kind of accumulating knowledge, okay, from each edition of the games and transfer that to the next Olympic Winter Games. And by that method, they have reduced the cost overruns. So I think the IOC needs credit for that. And probably, so they appear to be successful in the cost reduction. And also, to my surprise, you cannot statistically argue that the Olympic Games has gone up in price, nor down in price. It's not statistically significant. So they cannot conclude. So there has been expensive games in the past as well. It's just that we haven't adjusted for the currency. So here are some positives. You see that the broadcast revenues was not large historically. It cannot explain the Olympic program historically. There were no television before 1960 in Squaw Valley. That's the 8th edition, I think. But that was just for internally in America. You had maybe the international breakthrough for television was 1968. 1964 in Tokyo was the breakthrough for international television. And as late as 1980, broadcasters didn't pay a lot. So people say, yeah, you need to have a TV-friendly sports. Well, yeah, but there were no television when they decided the sports program. And a lot had to adjust. But at least they have increased broadcasting. Top program also increased. It's very good. In this 4-year cycle, they have a turnover of almost 8 billion now. Yeah, it's over $8 billion. Progenium is a 4-year cycle. Okay? So, but again, if we calculate this in annual growth, because you see in the business papers, right, we talk about annual GDP growth, annual growth in earnings. Everything is expressed in the same format, you can say. So what is this in annual growth? It's 6% in annual growth. That's very good. That's, you can see GDP growth is maybe, if you're happy, we have a GDP growth of 2.53% in Norway, and then that's our performance. China has, this is almost China numbers, 6%, that's good. But it's not a shift. It's supposed to grow, okay? It's not more than 6% either. So, so if they grow further, I think they can possibly grow in a pro forma break-even, because if they have total revenues of $8.3 billion, summer plus Winter Olympics, 1 4-year cycle, and the average cost is kept at the historic cost, sports-related cost, they are soon in balance. Okay, US taxpayers pay, and IOC and the sports, they keep the money, but it's almost breaking even. So that's also, so if they even manage to reduce cost of the Winter Games, particularly, but also the Summer Games, in fact, they are a value contributor. I would have bought that stock soon, not yet, but soon, if it were listed on the stock exchange. But let's not forget that the European Football Federation has twice the sales of the IOC combined, so it shows the size of soccer. And FIFA has also more than the IOC. So, but at least this is a positive. So here again, I need to define the different items. I'm only interested in what each discipline costs, right? I need to take operational cost including, but only sports-related cost, and particularly disciplines I want to look at. So sports-related cost was 74 billion. Then you have sports-related capital expenditure, right? That's the investment. And OPEX is operating expenditure. So 74. And then I again can make a pro forma profit and loss statements. So total revenues in 1993-2016 was almost, it was 31.883 billion US dollars. But the cost of the Winter Olympics was 35, Summer Olympics 38. So some sports-related costs was 74. So you end up with a loss of 42 billion. Statistic, this is a very static picture then. It's a negative margin. So express this average per 4 years is 7 billion, or adjusted for such is 4.3 billion. Or annual loss is $1 billion. It's not sustainable in that angle. It is a loss after all, but it's growing the right direction. Okay, here you see the Winter Olympics historic cost. You see it's a huge standard deviation, right? But it's on average, here is, in this year's shorter period, it's increased with almost 6 billion. I think Pyeongchang ended with 12 or 13 billion dollars. I think, and everything was sports related. So when Sochi uses 15 billion, what is the difference? It's not. Here's the summer games, again, just running through the numbers, and you can make a complete statement, but this is the same as I've shown, so don't pay attention to this, it's essentially the same. So my conclusion is that there has been a value destruction, particularly in winter sports, because they chose the wrong program, but it can be turned around. And you will be future leaders, you can turn it around. They need more sports, but they need low-cost sports. Principle 7 of the Olympic principle require compliance to the values of Olympism. That was the key message in Agenda 2020. So there needs to be competition, qualifications of sports that best meet these principles. Yeah. So the integrity of the games is dependent on good governance and fair play in the procedure to select sports program. Okay? Evidently, it should be fair play. They haven't done that. You know, society is based on meritocracy, right? Sports is about merits. The system can be described as meritocratic. This is not based on merits. It's based on aristocracy. You happen to be there in 1924. They are privileged. They are shielded from competition. It's a very strange phenomenon in the society. So, okay, I think I've been through all the presentations that I was planning for today, and we are soon leaving for ice hockey. So hopefully you have some questions now. If not, I'm just talk. Yes, I think we've been through what I planned, and tomorrow I will talk with Irina and we'll see what we'll talk about. Popularity, for example, I can go more into figures for that, or accountability. So two other main. So what is the status then? If you want to be in Olympic sport, you need to plan 11 or 10 years ahead. Most fail there. Okay, this summer they will decide the sports program for 2026. That's 7 years, okay, ahead of the games. They simultaneously decide the sports program and the city. And in the winter games, it's probably Milano, Cortina, or Stockholm, Åre. But the decision is done simultaneously, so when can new sports come in? In reality, they say it's decided this summer, but it's in reality decided 2 years prior to that in the so-called bid book, the candidature file. The candidature file is the template in which the cities shall prepare the application. In reality, it's decided in that. Okay? So, 2026 is really decided. New sports, regardless which one that can be can only be the additional sport, unless the IOC says, well, we are flexible. We can take in a new fixed on the program. But not according to IOC schedule. It's not possible. It's another artificial barriers to entry, I think, but that's the system. So IOC, there are thousands of sports in the world, at least hundreds of important sports in the world. Not all can be in Olympics, Kit McCollum says to me, and I said to him, no, only the qualified should be in the games. And no, I couldn't show that. Okay. If you think this, if I've been talking too complicated or too easy for you, please give me feedback and I will adjust it tomorrow. If you like a very simplified version, but still correct, there's a website I created called Bandy in Olympics in one word, okay? And there's a petition where we petition the IOC to include bandy because it would be fair. And 10,600 has signed that, and that's a lot in winter sports. I mean, excluded for ice hockey is 50,000 athletes, right? So it is popular. And, people in Scandinavia demand it increasingly. And I'm sure in Russia also will join that. It will benefit for ice hockey. Over 90% of all athletes are ice hockey players. Probably 90% of all athletes in the world are ball sports athletes. And there is no ball sport in the Olympics. The closest you can get to soccer and ice hockey is bandy. So it's a discrimination, in fact, of ice hockey players or footballers that they don't have an affordable sport. But there you can read bandy in Olympics, and then you can test. If you have any question, just send me an email, and I will respond. So that's what I'm surprised to see that I've finished 15 minutes ahead, because you were very nice to me. You didn't ask me any questions, so I can just carry on and talk and talk and talk. So now, so I think what the new sport shall do then is to work with the Olympic Program Commission and try to sell their message for 2030. That likely will go in Salt Lake City or Sapporo. Those two have flagged that they are interested. Oslo is, not Oslo, but Norway is, they suggest, but I'm not so sure they will do that, but maybe. I believe the Winter Games will survive. Remember, the IOC has always delivered on the games. In its core, the IOC shall organize the games every 4th year. And they always delivered, regardless of the hardships, with 2 exceptions, of course, World War I and World War II. So I think the Winter Games will survive. Most people believe it will die, but I believe it will survive. So that's my view. I think the IOC is in the right direction. Now, Boris Grynik, he calls me Che Guevara. Boris Grynik is the president of the International Badminton Federation. He calls me Che Guevara because he thinks I'm revolutionary, and it's just teasing me. But I don't believe in revolutions, but I believe in a bit sharper reform. But at least the IOC is in a reform program. They are trying to be better. Journalists tend to forget that. So I think they are doing progress. So you don't misunderstand me. And also all these sports are fantastic sports, fantastic athletes, fantastic volunteers, It's nothing about that. It's just that society is competitive. We cannot shield any from competition. Okay. Yes.
Я могу по-русски, коллеги, вы переведете? Это second channel. Меня зовут Мария Гришко, и мы коллеги. Я преподаватель Олимпийского университета. У меня очень интересно, я хотела бы поблагодарить, наверное, от всех имени коллег, всех тоже, да, за очень интересную презентацию. Много цифр, которые, я думаю, что многие из нас будут в практике своей использовать тоже. У меня два вопроса. Первый вопрос про бенди. Да? Все мы знаем этот вид спорта, но если мы посмотрим на нашу российскую практику, мы прекрасно знаем, что хоккей, традиционный ледовый хоккей, он у нас более популярен в стране. У нас есть сильная лига, которая, как мне кажется, занимает после НХЛ второе место в мире. У нас есть сильная федерация, у нас есть сильная сборная. Она популярна, ее смотрят, за нее болеют. Этот вид спорта знают хорошо. Если мы говорим про бенди, его популярность достаточно сильно ниже, скажем так. Да? У нас меньше инфраструктуры, меньше известен сам вид, меньше болельщиков и так далее. Вот как вы считаете, вы специалист, вы эксперт, как вы думаете, что должна сделать Российская Федерация, вот 3 основных шага, для того, чтобы хотя бы попытаться выйти на уровень Федерации хоккея на льду в России? Это первое. По популярности, по доходам и так далее. И второй вопрос, сразу, если можно. Вы говорили о том, что открытые арены, на которых играют в бенди, это здорово, популярно, экологично и дешево. Но мы все прекрасно знаем, что болельщик наш сейчас привык к комфорту, ему нужен хороший уровень сервиса. Как вы считаете, реально ли открытой арене, где холодно зимой, конкурировать с закрытой ареной, на которой играют в ледовый хоккей сейчас, традиционно в России? То есть возможно ли такое развитие этой открытой инфраструктуры, или люди туда просто не пойдут? Вот 2 вопроса. Спасибо.
Спасибо. Well, as I said, the first question is ice hockey is more popular than bandy, is the question. And she asked whether what bandy could do. But that's what I'm trying to do. The difference between ice hockey, which originally its name was Canadian hockey rules, okay? Bandy is Anglo-Russian hockey. Historically, the name of bandy was hockey, ice hockey. It was the European version of ice hockey. But because the IOC was angry with the Swedes, they boycotted Sweden. So bandy was not included. And that's the explanation. 196 years, hundreds of billions of dollars. Ice hockey Canadian hockey gets monopoly. It would not have been legal in any other market. But that's the main explanation. So we lose countries. Germany, Czechoslovakia, everyone goes into ice hockey. So this is, you need, as I told you, if I were a ski orienteer, I would demand scientists to adjust for the context. So, is it possible for relatively small sports to develop outside this financial system that the IOC? I don't think so, but I might be wrong. You could do it in huge sports, like American football or baseball or cricket. Huge, yes. But winter sports is about subsidies. So I don't think it's possible. I think we could probably do more. And then I had a good story, because there was no ice hockey in Russia until after World War II. And Soviet Union took bandy players and trained them into ice hockey players and won the World Championships in 1954 with bandy players. My hypothesis is US and Canada can do the same in reverse and take a medal in bandy, because they are so good in ice hockey. Okay, the second question is comfort. Well, yes, I think in outdoors, but I'm conservative bandy. A lot of people in bandy want to go indoors. It's unrealistic, I think. Yes, for the World Championships and very outside season, affordable venues, yes, just for training. And for example, for World Championships, now we'll go in Irkutsk next year, indoor arena, because it needs to be safe. Yes, of course. But to scale the sport, we will never build 7,000 indoor enclosed bandy arenas. Most of the Winter Olympic sports are outdoor. Football, they play outdoor. And we use the same as football. Same stadium. No difference. So yes, I think it's possible. Thank you. Спасибо.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. I'll think about. Thank you a lot for listening. Remember that this bandy example is just an example. It can be used in other contexts as well. It's not only marketing of bandy. It's more how the IOC is a non-democratic organization. And the one thing is that not a lot of organizations is not governed by public elections, right? A lot of organizations that are private, but in let's say in business, then it's more like stockholders voting power. But what we always have in society is the other control mechanisms, like. In financial industry, we have the supervisory authority looking that information is sent correctly, right? Annual statements, no inside information. Also in healthcare, we have supervisory authorities, the auditors. We have watchdogs. The watchdogs in the Olympic movement is enforced from governments because they get tired of the sports and never can. We had the bribery scandal in Salt Lake City. It was disclosed 1999, I think. Then the US Senate and the Congress enforce. They say to the IOC, you must have a supervisory authority control this. And the IOC responded positively, and they established the IOC Ethics Code. And the IOC Ethics Committee. So now you see they stop bribery scandals, they take out, because we don't like any kind of manipulations. And you have the Olympic Movement Code, which has the long name against on the prevention of manipulations of competitions, right? Because we don't like match rigging either. No competition should be manipulated. And now, of course, we had the Festina scandal also in 1999, and we get the WADA code. The doping problem. So there are some supervisory authorities, but not on the sports program. And that's the most important. After all, you can have qualified Russian bandy athletes that cannot go to the Olympic Games because they retain a quota for a less qualified athlete in the smaller non-qualified sports based on the program decided in 1924. So there is manipulation of a kind. Unless, of course, the IOC can say, Knut, you are wrong. But so far they haven't. So they don't need to be a democracy, but they need watchdogs. Because we people, we believe Linda is a librarian, but she's not. Turns out she's not. Okay. Tatjana, I think we reached the conclusion of the day. Thanks a lot for listening. I talk a lot. You can just put some money on and I talk and talk. I'll see you then tomorrow at the same time, isn't it, Tatjana? Okay. So, thank you. Okay.